Hi, I'm Drew Hutchison, and you are not tuned to Local Bias. We are coming to you from Greenfield Community Television at 393 Main Street in beautiful downtown Greenfield, where it's getting colder and colder. But that's the environment, and we are going to be talking about the environment because this is a brand new show called The Great River Show. So we'll talk specifically about the Connecticut River, but we'll talk about all things environmental because we're all living in it. And to help us navigate this bizarre world is my good buddy, Karl Meyer. Karl, thank
Drew,
you.
Happy New Year, thank you. And just so Drew's off the hook, I kind of suggested a little opened up format for this, and we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes, yeah. Send your letters, as always. You know, I try to take time every week to read the duffel bags full of letters that we get.
There you go. And, you know, loosely, Connecticut River Valley. We're not going by, you know, Pioneer Valley or some marketing knowledge card or a zip code or an area code. We're going to try to keep things philosophically grounded in this great valley that we live in, which is the Connecticut River. So, but there, you know, there's other things along the way, and I don't know if let me start with a couple offhanded things, if you don't mind, Drew.
I don't know.
You live in town. I've been bumping into up in the woods along Poet Seat or whatever into barred owls recently.
Right.
You know, sort of, they're out during the day sunning themselves. They're about to sort of pair up, and you know, within a month or so, they will be nesting and, you know, sitting on eggs in 6-8 weeks. And then I heard a story on public radio, and they're trying to save something called the spotted owl. You've probably heard of the spotted owl. Big deal, Pacific Northwest, several states, Washington, Oregon, British Columbia. What they're doing, here's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's bid to save the spotted owl, is that barred owls have slowly made their way west, and they're very closely related in genus, right, Strix. So what the solution is for all these barred owls is they're paying people to shoot them, and they want to shoot not a couple, a dozen, not a few, 450,000. 450,000 barred owls they want to get rid of so that they can reclaim habitat for the spotted owl.
Now, is the barred owl an invasive species?
No. Well,
species naturally migrate and expand territory and contract based upon environmental conditions, but it's not as if this came from overseas, like the zebra mussel or something like that.
Well, it did in some ways because it came from a bunch of, this is how we colonized North America. White Europeans moved into the Midwest and across. We planted trees in the Great Plains. Mm-hmm. The owls moved with their territory. And now they're supposedly displacing spotted owls. Now, spotted owls, as far as I remember, they're also sort of more old growth, big forest, but we've also been cutting those down.
Right, so we've been reducing their habitat.
Yeah.
So wouldn't having the proper habitat be maybe more important than killing off another species?
Well, this is the problem with any time you sort of pick one species over another, single species. We're going to talk about Atlantic salmon here pretty soon. But can you imagine? I mean, this story had a guy going out, and he maybe shoots 2 or 3 a week. And he just goes out there with a gun and a light, and you find these perfectly wonderful creatures out in the woods just exercising, and we want to shoot 450,000 of them. So I just wanted to bring this up to get that look on your face, this is absolute. I mean, as who used to say, you could look it up, Yogi, I guess, Yogi Berra.
It's like life is a catch-22 novel or something. It's just the absurdity.
You run into it all the time. You know, just walking up here, we had 1/8 of an inch of snow, and I think there's a 1/2 inch of rock salt in the street. You know,
what does that do for the environment?
So, one other note here.
Okay.
I went down, I'm sort of Melville-like, you know, instead of when December gets really dark and I want to like step in front of a carriage or a bus or something, I need to get to the ocean.
Okay.
So, you know, this is the alternative. So I was down in Provincetown right around the 1st of December, 2nd of December. Nobody's there at that time. You know, it's really cold, town's cleaned out. And there's just light and waves and wind and empty beach and forest. So anyway, but I woke up one morning and I had a view out onto the bay, and it was there was just a leak in the window shade, and the light just poured straight in from like the southeast. Boom, hit me. I was like, and a few minutes later, I am watching whale spouts coming through that golden light of these whale spouts. Just amazing, you know. And there were at least 3 of them. They could have been probably a mile out. Okay, it just you know, sort of made my day. You know, it just getting out there and sort of being in that light is great. And then I guess not much more than a week later, the news is 3 different whales along Cape Cod Bay from Plymouth to Wellfleet to Provincetown washed up dead. One of them boat strike probably, the other one entangled in fishing gear.
Right, and then they drown.
And yeah, and fishing gear, folks, means basically lobster traps usually, or trawler nets or whatever.
Right.
So if you want to save the whale, it's not a bumper sticker. Could you give up lobster? Would that be? I mean, there are what, 350 right whales, northern right whales left, and they were supposedly in the bay that time. I have no idea what these whales were, to be honest with you. I tried to, but could we do that?
Well, that's never going to happen.
Is that so?
Because you have all these people whose livelihoods rely upon lobstering, and you have restaurants that want lobsters and people that want lobsters, and there's a demand. And if you outlaw it, then it becomes a black market. It still goes on.
Well, it still goes on, but I mean, you know, if we never take individual responsibility, you know, we're a country that supposedly, you know, we have these great freedoms as individuals, and to wait around and say the government's going to do something,
right?
You can do something yourself.
Right.
You can stop. So I just thought I'd bring up those fun things. Otherwise,
so you're recommending no more lobster?
I'm recommending that, you know, take a look at your life. Can you live without lobster?
I mean, can live without lobster, Karl.
We do not live by the ocean. If you need a lobster when you go to the beach once a year, have a lobster.
Well, the funny thing is the lobster itself used to be considered a poor person's food.
Of course. You know, there was all these taboos, yeah. And, you know, part of that has to do, some with Native Americans, and there are all these prejudices. Did you make any resolutions, by the way?
I never do.
I love you for that.
I mean, I am a work in progress.
So.
It's not as if I've reached the pinnacle of my adulthood or whatever it is of being a human.
Yeah.
But the idea of resolutions has never really appealed to me. I always thought, well, I don't know, it just doesn't appeal to me. I know that I need to keep working. I need to keep improving. I need to be able to look at myself and say, wow, you know, it'd be better if you exercised a little bit more or ate better foods, or, you know, were kinder to old ladies instead of kicking them to the curb every time you see them. No, I don't do that. But
we're watching you, Drew. As a matter of fact, we're all being watched. Every piece.
Right now, we're being watched on TV.
So that's right. So, but anyway, you know, no, I'm glad to hear that. I don't really, you know, it's sort of like, well, there was December 31st, and now this is the next day. Do you keep going? Yes, we're welcoming a new Congress, and we will see what happens.
We will see what happens.
We all have work to do, and some of mine's been about the Connecticut River, as you know.
Right.
So today I thought we would kick back. Last time we did a local bias. I asked you about, you know, just generalizations, and you said, well, what are the species on the Connecticut River? And you said, Atlantic salmon. And the fact of the matter is Atlantic salmon have not been species or a subspecies or whatever. There hasn't been a real viable Atlantic salmon run since 1809. Some say 1815, right? And everybody liked to sort of say that, okay, the dams killed them off, and the dams did help kill them off. You know, the first dam on the Connecticut was built in 1798, which blocked off all that upriver. There's another 300 some odd miles upstream of that, about 290. But there were other, there were other problems that were going on, and we had an Atlantic salmon restoration that still seems to be hanging in the air. There hasn't been a salmon that was in the river at Holyoke for about 5 years, but we spent 45 years fish farming. We decided we would create a new species back in 1967. There was something called the New England Fisheries Cooperative to Migratory Fisheries Cooperative. 4 states, 2 federal agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And they decided, first of all, the first species mentioned was American shad, which was here. We're right in their wheelhouse. And they were promising, I think, just about 1 million shad to pass Holyoke, 850,000 to pass Turners Falls. The second species mentioned, Atlantic salmon, hadn't been here forever. There was no salmon run to restore, right? And then the third species they mentioned were blueback herring, and those were still viable. And so there's all this historical evidence that went on about why we should restore Atlantic salmon. And it was the king of fish, and it's the big Orvis fancy, you know. It's sort of this romantic idea of the leaping fish, king of fish,
right?
Single species. So all of a sudden, this cooperative sort of fisheries restoration turned very quickly into an Atlantic salmon hatchery program. Hatcheries get built, millions of dollars. There's Kensington, there's White River, there's Sunderland, there's North Attleboro. They all go to work producing salmon smolts and fry, and it's kind of a grim little way. You got fish from other still viable runs but struggling up in eastern Canada or Maine, right? You take them, you strip the eggs out of the female. In some places they actually just cut the eggs out of them, and then you strip the milt, which is the sperm, and then you raise them basically in a hatchery system. And this went on for 45 years, right? And
with no positive outcome.
Right, there are no barriers between Long Island Sound, which is where they have to come up into the Connecticut River, and Holyoke Dam.
Okay.
And for 43 years, there were a few years where they got 200 plus Atlantic salmon, right?
Not 1,000.
Right, and the target was pretty low because they weren't a big, sort of schooling run fish here ever, even into the colonial records. So they wanted they were hoping for 40,000. They never got but there was not even a year where they got above 360, right? And it just kept going and going. And what they did, and I brought along this document here. This is the Federal Power Commission hearings about building fish passage at Turners Falls Dam because Holyoke Dam was already working. 1975 August, right? And they were already talking about climate in 1975. There's a guy, what's his name? Bob Jones. He was DEP, Environmental Protection of Connecticut, and he became this big salmon guy. But they asked him if the thermal profile of Long Island Sound was okay to host salmon, because salmon is a cold water fish, right? He said yes. And his information was coming from the Atomic Energy Agency, Millstone Atomic, and they were just building all these plants
that were heating the water,
including Haddam, Connecticut, directly in the river, right? And so they came up with this idea. It'll work, and then they based their whole fish passage scheme on salmon and shad who had been transported to the Pacific Northwest in the Snake and Columbia, mighty Columbia. And they had big fish passage, and everything was going great. And they thought, we'll scale this down. We'll just make a mini one. And it never worked. From day one, it never worked, right? It never worked for shad. Salmon, and there's no doubt that salmon actually they're great leapers. They could get above Turners. They could go above Bellows Falls, where shad never went because it was so steep, all the way to Beecher's Falls. But they were small. If you lived on a cold water outside stream, you would think that salmon was the fish because it was the only big run fish you would see.
Right.
So they got over-magnified in these few historic records, right? So come 1992, a woman named Catherine Carlson, who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, knew about different runs. There were Chinook salmon, there were steelhead, there were Pacific salmon, knew about them, came here and was working on her PhD in anthropology at UMass. She took on the old boy system. She wrote a paper called A History of Atlantic Sound. Boy, I can't believe I didn't bring that with me. But Catherine Carlson's thesis, history, social implications about the salmon restoration, went through all the records, right, of noted records, the few. I mean, they were here. Nobody denied it. But then she went ahead and looked at something called the Little Ice Age. Mm-hmm. And salmon, there just were not a lot of salmon here. There were a few scattered reports maybe from the Hudson. We were the southernmost warm river that this species ever sort of pioneered, right? They don't come in big schools. And she took them on. In 1992, it was a big deal. She put the big crack in this ridiculous, salmon restoration. It was basically fish farming. The smolts and the fry you put in the river, they were half as likely to survive as wild fish. And then since then, we've added actual pen farming out in the Atlantic and those diseases. The hatcheries used to get diseases. They'd have to be totally bleached out and cleaned. All the fish had to die. They had to kill all the fish because they couldn't put them in the river because they would mix. It was a poop show. Carlson was right. I grabbed onto her stuff pretty early on. But you know who was on her committee and examined her thesis, her PhD?
Boyd Kennard.
Dr. Boyd Kennard, right? And all of a sudden, I'm hearing these sort of, there's a few people out there that want to sort of rehash this whole thing. She did the Connecticut River a big favor. I ended up writing about it, from, I think I started in 1999, and when I left Northfield Mountain, I for 5 years straight, all I wrote about was trying to tell the public and put an end to this program. And I finally did. I was in Sanctuary Magazine, wrote something called Turner's Falls Turnaround, which was a big deal. And what else? How to keep a dead fish alive. These things ran in the Worcester Telegram all the way to the Free Press. They finally killed the program. And they killed the program in 2013. And it took another woman to do it, Wendy Weber, who was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Region 5. I think we're still Region 5 director, 13 states. And she finally, Boyd was shocked that she answered my op-eds in the paper. He goes, that never happened. That has never happened in the history of this. And for a long time, even Boyd was telling me they'll never stop doing this. And I just sort of kept wading through the darkness. And this isn't really about me, but it was my work. And you get calls from people. The guy, I forget what's his name, the guy that wrote Yankee Salmon. He used to be the Harvard School, and he was the dean of Yale Environment School. I knew it would never work. All of a sudden you hear from these people. It finally collapsed. Beth Daly, I happened to be home when Beth Daly from the Boston Sunday Globe called up. And I got like one of the last quotes in the Globe, which basically was, the restoration was like the emperor's new clothes. Now we get to talk about all the other fish. And that's what we should have been talking about all the time. People keep going down this single species, just like the sole spotted owl. Well, we're going to do this to do that. Or now everybody is grasping at a few short-nosed sturgeon have been sort of documented upstream, where they probably, they've been documented by like super duper science that costs a whole lot of money to get here. But does it matter? Are the agencies going to do anything about something like that? You talk about a river, you should be screaming, our hair is on fire, our river runs backwards into a plant that is run on fossil fuels, wastes 34% baseline energy, and kills everything that goes up and tries to get back down. So that is sort of what I brought to you today, and I've just been blathering along, Drew.
Well, it's fascinating.
Thank you for the time on the Great River Show.
It is fascinating, and the thing is this is a great river, and it's our heritage, and we should leave it in a better place than we found it. And that's not what's happening.
It's not what's
unless
happening.
People roll up their sleeves and join.
It is not, and the agencies and the NGOs, they're playing for such a low bar consolation prize on this river. If you are not talking about a river that's essentially dead, if it stops in its tracks and goes the wrong way and kills everything and wastes energy and is literally, and you could connect it up to these landscape scale solar projects that are all being, because National Grid and Eversource, those wires all connect up to Northfield, and these are transglobal corporations that are sort of bringing this stuff in, LLCs or whatever.
Right.
So that's where we are. That's the whole ball game, really.
Well, and when it comes to solar panels, when they talk about, oh, well, we're just going to cut all this forest right here and put renewable energy, it's like, we have roadways, we have parking lots, we have endless expanse of asphalt. Put the solar panels there. It'll, for one thing, it doesn't make any sense to me. This idea of cutting forests, how is that green?
Garages, infrastructure, you're absolutely right. Every bridge or whatever, I will give Joe Comerford credit for sort of jumping on a bill that says, last resort is taking our land, and here's first they're burning through the water with fossil fuel. Now they're going to burn through and claim that we can run a river backwards. How much solar you got to build to that? But the other sort of absurd thing about this is, we're going to keep it farmland. You might be able to grow a crop or put some goats under there, and it's just window dressing. I mean, what the Earth is saying to us, Drew, in these climately warm times, is telling us to change. And if the grown-ups are not willing to be honest with themselves, we're not being honest with our
well, the
people
thing
coming
is
along after us.
The wealth junkies need their fix, and they are in a position to keep getting another fix because somehow people look at them as if they are virtuous because of their wealth. Our society has our priorities all mixed up. What's the point of wealth if you've killed the planet?
Our administration is emblematic of this. I mean, this is flabbergasting me. What's the name of the climate summit that they have every year? Do you?
I don't know.
They just it's got an acronym. Anyway, the industrialized first world, bad idea. Countries are going to donate to the people that are getting smashed by climate change, and what they call I don't know what the better term is. There should be a lot better terms. We're willing to offer them $300 billion. $300 billion. That's less than Elon Musk is worth.
Right.
That is, if there's not obscenity in that, I don't know.
Well, and that actually, speaking of worth, because of the gross worth of these individuals, by comparison, we are all worth less. We are worthless.
And I wonder, as we sort of see this whole AI. I mean, every keystroke we have is now tracked, and we become our advertising algorithms. I mean, they just reflect back to us what we accept from them.
Right. Well, and the other thing about AI though is that it's an energy hog.
Oh, massive.
So that's why we need all these new solar powers and stuff, because we've been developing efficiencies. You can run a home now on net zero energy, but there's such a demand for AI and for blockchain that is just sucking all the energy.
That's what brought us to this pinnacle. But we want to be these comfortable people. But I keep thinking, well, what about all these super rich technocrats, or just the people that are very comfortable off technology? When AI catches up to them, and you're not needed anymore.
Right.
You're not needed anymore. All we seem to like bash the people that pick our crops and do the other things, and then meanwhile I'll go into Stop and Shop, and there are 8 lanes of cashiers, and there are 8 lanes of self-checkout, and there'll be one cashier. And then I will stand in that line until the cows come home.
Well, I won't shop. I don't go to Stop and Shop, and they're a union shop, so I support them on that level. But I can't go there because the experience is so bad, and I don't want to pay for a self-checkout. I'm sorry.
I mean,
I want someone to have a job.
Are sucking information out of you.
Of course they are.
You're giving
Every
your
transaction.
life away, and it's not just Stop and Shop. We're going to get a new Aldi's, which is it's another big box store. It's few employees, do your own stuff.
Right.
And we just become invisible.
Well, this has happened with a lot of organizations, because now, for instance, let's say that you have a problem with this bill or that bill. you contact the company and you go through a phone tree and you don't even talk to a person. Everything is, you're providing the labor. They have offshored the labor to the consumer so that they can make a fractional more profit. And that extends into every large bureaucracy at this point. So the actual workers, they're overworked. They have contradictory jobs. Imagine working in healthcare and your job is to deny health care to people. And yet that's what we have in our world right now.
Absolutely.
We have people dying from lack of health care because they were told, no, you're not covered for that. And so they die.
This is the new Great River Show. I know. I mean, this is we're reflecting back what we're reflecting, giving them back what they want us to reflect to them.
Right.
And we're talking about this because journalism is starving, and without local journalism and local reporting, can democracy survive?
I don't think so.
I mean, that's about where we're sort of getting to, and people don't want to. I can find it online. Crap. I mean, most of it's just a market.
Right.
It's a meat market and diversion, and we're very good at okay, we're going to have new casino gambling, we're going to have cannabis on the street corners. We just seem to create these things where we do not recognize reality. We're not grounded in anything anymore.
Well, that's because the profit motive is what matters to our culture, and
that's how we value ourselves.
That
isn't
is.
It, Drew?
People care about how they look. Do I dress to impress? Do I have status? Do I drive the right car? Do I drink the right drinks? Do I have the right views? And so there's this conformity that is forced upon us because humans want to fit in with each other. And so in a way, we're all just being herded to be good consumers. We're not even taught to be people. We're taught to be buying stuff. You are what you buy.
Very true. I see a lot of people. Okay, we have this bus system, and right now it's been free, right? Because partly it's been free because they wanted poor people, to come back to work or be able to get their appointments or whatever. But I have a lot of friends that are sort of green or whatever, and I take the bus, fair amount.
And you ride your bike a lot.
I ride my bike. I walk everywhere. My car will sit for weeks. But have I ever seen anybody? Do I ever meet anybody I know on the bus? Never.
No.
Never.
That's asking too much.
Because I'm going to go sit on the bank line. I'm going to go sit on the coffee line. I have this little errand to do. It's not convenient. Everything is on demand.
Right.
On demand. Our wants far exceed our needs, and we prioritize wants over needs.
And we prioritize convenience, which is why we have the food that poisons us and makes us sick. It's all, but that's
so.
So
there you go.
All right, the Great River Show.
The Great River Show, first version, but we'll do some more, sort of river-centered stuff. But I've enjoyed it. I hope it's just sort of let's have something a little less hypey.
Okay, we don't have to worry about being too slick. At least
that's true. Although you made me take off my sister's sweater, I thought I looked rather good.
You looked great, but I wanted the microphone to be placed appropriately. Sorry about that, Karl.
No, that's great. But I've enjoyed it, and if it's a dud, was my suggestion.
This is local cable access.
That's
if you can't be a dud on local cable access, you can't
Where
be a
can
dud.
you be?
That's right. So, I hope we do continue this because it's always a pleasure, and it's nice not to have it be a local bias because frankly I have other guests that want to come on, and you shouldn't monopolize it. So hey, now we have your own show, the Great River Show.
I've always wanted to be,
You're a star.
A small fish in a small pool.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Karl. This is a lot of fun.
Good.
I hope the viewers at home have been enjoying this. We anticipate having more sit-downs. It's a little bit more informal in a way than what you may be used to with Local Bias. But the Great River Show on Greenfield Community Television, I anticipate future episodes.
Tune us in. See us on the big screen.
Absolutely. Take care.